Hey everybody, Brian Goulet here with the Goo-Littles, Ellie and Joseph. These are my kids. I haven't had them on in forever, but I thought it would be kind of fun. We are getting our carpets cleaned at our house today, so we couldn't go home just quite yet. So Mommy came and brought you guys to work with us. So just thought we could do a little cameo here before we get into the Q&A.
Yeah!
Yeah? You guys excited about summer starting?
Yeah!
I know you love school, but you know, summer's gonna be fun too, right?
Yeah! I want to go to the beach! Even better.
Yeah? So, Joseph, why don't you tell me about some of your favorite things right now?
Well, I love my Z power ring. It has a rainbow Z crystal.
What is that? For those people that don't know.
It is basically something used in Pokemon Sun and Moon.
And do you
Yeah.
know who gave
You're pretty into Pokemon, aren't
Do
you?
you know who gave it to
And
Ash?
you can make a Pokemon use a Z move, which is super powerful.
Yeah, really powy!
Oh yeah? What about you, Ellie? What are some of the things you're into right now?
Ooh, dinosaur!
Yeah, you gave me that.
Hey,
That's why it's on my desk.
dinosaur.
Ellie, what kind of things are you into right now?
Probably dinosaur.
Dinosaurs? Yeah?
Dinosaur!
Okay.
I'm
All right.
pretty sure it's just that dinosaur.
Is there anything you guys want to say to the people that follow Goulet pens?
Yeah.
What do you want to say? Special message.
Squishy! Dinosaur!
Just letting you know, I'm a Pokemon master. Of course you needed to know that.
Me too!
Okay.
And
Yeah.
dinosaur!
All right, guys. Well, thank you for being on the video. Thanks. Want to say bye to everybody?
Bye!
Bye. All right. Thought that'd be kind of a fun little thing. Oh man, I haven't had them on video in a long time. Probably like not 7 years. Ellie was on when she was an infant, so 6 years maybe. Anyway, it is Q&A episode number 212 this week. I'm in a giddy mood because I'm on this whole new diet regimen and everything. It's going to be an interesting Q&A today. We'll see how it goes. But, you know, basically I took yesterday off, went up to see my nutritionist. He's about 2 hours away, a very kind of specialized nutritionist who helped Rachel get, you know, her stuff all straightened out. I have been on a special diet for the last 6 months or so, and I have not quite dialed it in yet. So I got kind of a tweaking yesterday, and I'm now on an intermittent fasting, so I cannot eat between 8 p.m. and 10 a.m. the next day on a daily regimen for the next 2 months. I am now, you know, super restricted on some of my foods. Can't have any grains. Can't have any farm-raised meats because of amyloid proteins, apparently. And like this whole like health stuff, like I tried so hard. I studied biology in school, and it was like my worst subject. I can't memorize anything worth a heck. And so I struggle to kind of understand some of this stuff, but I know I'm seeing people that know what they're doing, and I'm gonna get it dialed in. I'm bound and determined, but I was literally ordered to like sleep more, which sounds crazy, but for me to get 7 or 8 hours of night of sleep consistently is very difficult because I'm a night owl and I just drive hard all day. So 5 to 6 hours has been my norm. So I have to get more sleep. So I've got to adjust my personal life in order to accommodate that. And then the whole fasting thing and not being able to eat some of the foods that I love so dearly, like no artificial sugars whatsoever, no chocolate, none of that. Got to cut it all out. I could go on and on about that, but essentially those are the details. So I'm going to get it honed in, but you know, hopefully if I can get it taken care of, you'll see me drop some weight over the next couple of months. I don't know if it's going to happen. I've been on this 6 months so far, but now we've kind of like ratcheted it up a little bit. But I'm about 230 pounds right now, which is, you know, it's not super light, not super heavy, but kind of in the middle of where I've been. The max where I was, if you've been following my videos for a long time, I was 260. That was my peak of when I was the heaviest. Like if you look at the Fountain Pen 101 videos, that's kind of where I was around that time. And then I lost 65 pounds, and I've since put 35 back on. This is kind of the ping pong that I've done my whole life, but I'm trying to actually ratchet it all in. Oh, the joys, right? But anyway, another big news that we have for this week is we announced on Wednesday during Right Now that we are launching a new website next week. And it's really exciting, especially for us, because now it's public and we don't have to try and keep it a secret anymore. We've been working on it for like 9 months, and we did not want to, you know, release any of the details or have, you guys questioning all kinds of things while we didn't have answers for anything. So now that we're, basically ready to launch, we can kind of publicly say, hey, we've been working on this thing for some time. I say we. Rachel's been doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Sam's helped out a lot. A number of the people on our team, Jeremy, Alex, Sarah, have helped out tremendously. A lot of other people on the team too. I don't want to leave anybody out, but those are some notable folks who contributed a lot. So it's been very, very intense having to do that, especially coming right off of our move last year. We moved into this space in August, and then almost immediately we had to start thinking about the website because we had a contract that was up this year on our current site, and things just have not panned out like we wanted to. So nothing against the provider that we're using, but they're like an enterprise platform, and you need custom developers to really have it pan out like that. I won't recap everything. You can watch right now if you want to get more details and hear it straight from Rachel's mouth about how it all worked out. But that has been a huge project for us, and it's going to be a big effort next week. So be on the lookout for that. Our site will be down for about 24 hours from Tuesday to Wednesday next week, and then we'll come back up. We'll have the new site, and you get to check it all out and tell us all your opinions. We'd love to hear them. So had a number of product related things coming about. We're in this weird period right now because we have the site launch coming. We actually have some products that are impending or will be coming in maybe in the next week or so that we're going to have to kind of put on pause, but basically we'll be able to launch as soon as the new site is up and smoothly operating. And then we have some other things. I literally have a time capsule bin in my office of new things that we haven't yet been able to explore fully because the new website has been number one priority. So that is going to be happening. And then we do have some other products that have come in or will be coming in. Actually that have come in by the time this video publishes. But the Aurora Talentum Black that came in last week. It's looking really good. Sleek, stealthed out pen. It's got an Aurora gold nib on it, and it's pretty nice. All blacked out gold nib. So I'm enjoying that one. It's the most affordable Aurora gold nib pen that we've had, mainly because it's a cartridge converter instead of a piston. So if you happen to like that or not like that or whatever, you can go check that out. Robert Oster Thunderstorm is the latest Robert Oster ink that we've gotten in stock, so you can check that one out. We got that now. Girologio has a new pen case called Bomber Brown. It's a different shade of brown, and it has a plaid kind of interior. It's a different kind of look, so you can check that out. We are going to be selling Opus 88. Hopefully, maybe we will have it by the time this video launches. I don't know. I'm recording this on Wednesday afternoon. As of Wednesday afternoon, we still don't know if it's coming on Thursday or what. We've set Friday as a cutoff date for we can't launch any new products from Friday through the site launch. So by the time you watch this, maybe we've launched it, but if not, then it'll be next week. But we're excited about that. We ordered it a while ago, and it's been, basically waiting to come in. So that's coming. Also got word that the Stipula Passaporto, for those of you that you might, it may be multi-generational now in terms of who's been waiting for that pen. But word on the street is it is on its way to the US, and we are going to have it to us very, very soon. So it's finally impending, I guess. So I'm kind of like, let's wait until we get it in. But anyway, just don't be surprised if you see that pop up in the next week or so. And then also the Visconti Torpedo, super nice, crazy, huge, beautiful pen, limited edition. That one is going to be coming out, kind of in that similar time frame. Visconti Vertigo as well, another Visconti pen, is a smaller Visconti Opera-esque size pen with a new nib on it. Should be kind of interesting, so you can check that one out. And then we are doing a couple of interesting things with Monteverde and Conklin. Haven't talked about this a whole lot, but in the midst of our site launch and all this other craziness, Monteverde and we've had some shortages on LAMY and stuff like that, like you might be aware of. But we've also had some shortages of Conklin and Monteverde. Long story short is they have had nib shortages. Just for your kind of general awareness, there's kind of like a global nib shortage. There's only so many, a very small handful of nib manufacturers. There are some companies like LAMY and Pilot and Platinum and stuff like that that make their own nibs in-house, but that's not the norm for all pen companies. So Bach, Yovo, and there's a couple other kind of unbranded, unnamed nib manufacturers out there, but there's really only a handful of them, and a lot of them are kind of at capacity, which I guess is good because it shows like, hey, demand for fountain pens is kind of on the rise, but at the same time, there's kind of some shortages of nibs, so there's some craziness going on there, kind of behind the scenes in the pen world. So part of that craziness has affected Monteverde and Conklin nibs. So they're in the process of kind of working through all that. But in the meantime, we have kind of worked out something interesting with them to be able to put Goulet nibs, since we have a stock of our own nibs, put them on the Monteverde Northern Lights and the Nebula, because they're limited pens and we have nibs, and we didn't just throw them on there haphazardly. We talked to them about it, but we basically kind of got permission to put our nibs on their pens so that we could just have pens. And then Conklin has their Omniflex nib, which I guess they had a stock of Omniflex nibs and not the normal nibs. So they had Omniflexes that they can put on other Conklin pens. So they're looking to do that just kind of in a special run, kind of in the meantime while they work out some of their other nib issues. So don't be surprised if you see some Conklin Omniflex nibs to come out in the next couple of weeks as well on pens besides the Duraflex, which is the only one they've released it on so far. So interesting stuff. And then we did get a LAMY restock. Not everything in the world that we wanted, but some decent stuff. So that's pretty cool. We relaunched the LAMY Accent, which we had years ago, and finally brought it back due to popular demand. I do have a Q&A question about that, so I won't answer it quite yet. And then also, I want to do a little unboxing. The LAMY Dialogue 3 has been like kind of a holy grail pen for me in some ways, and then we didn't carry it for a number of years, and then I got it back in now, and I really wanted one, and then we were out of stock of it for like 6 or 9 months. So we just got it back in, and I grabbed one for myself. So I actually haven't even opened it yet. This is the first time, so I'm going to do kind of a public unveiling of my personal LAMY Dialogue 3. So this is a twist retractable pen. I remember it from back when we used to carry it. And what happened was they raised the price on it, and demand really dropped off a number of years ago. Oh, it's a nice box. It's a bigger box than I remember it being. It's nice with the LAMY kind of embroidered onto it. It's really cool. And then there you go. You open it up, and I went for the matte black one personally. That's kind of cool. This box smells nice and new. And then how does this thing work? Just kind of pull up on the tab is like connected down there. Let's try and get this thing out of there. What am I doing wrong here with the tab? No, there we go. I just didn't pull it hard enough. Okay. So it's got the pen in here. It's got this little cap ring thing. I actually don't know what that's for. And then a little booklet, Dialogue 3. Ooh, very nicely styled. So it talks about the designer, how they kind of designed it, and got some nice marketing stuff in there. So that's pretty cool. This piece is interesting. I haven't, for those of you who bought the Dialogue 3 recently, I'm literally learning as I go here. You're seeing kind of part of my process. So let me open that up. I imagine that's a piece that goes on here to help actually remove the unit out of here if I had to guess. Anyway, I'll play with that in a minute, but it's a pretty interesting pen. So if you're not familiar, it uses the same kind of style of LAMY nib. It's a gold nib on here because it's a more premium priced pen, but it's a twist retractable. So you just go like this, boop, and it's kind of cool. So when you do it, let's see if I can get in here so you can see if it will focus on not my face. It's kind of cool because it will, ooh, there we go. It's got this little door that opens and closes. See that? And then the nib itself, boom, comes out like so. Neat. And then it's got a clip on here, and the clip, the engineering is pretty cool in this thing. The clip actually rises and falls when you open the pen. So that's kind of cool. I dig it. So had my eye on this pen for a while, and I was kind of curious. You're going to go on the journey with me. I'm curious what that little tool does. Let's figure it out real quick. If I can't figure it out in 30 seconds, I'm going to move on, I promise. Let's go ahead and skip 30 seconds in the video if you're not interested in this at all. Yeah, so this thread's on here. What does that do? That operates it. What does that do for me? So it allows me to operate the... Huh. It's a good question. Maybe if I read the materials, I'll find out. Well, it does screw onto there and allows you to operate it, but it doesn't. Okay, so I can unscrew the mechanism and take the nib unit out. This is actually how you fill the pen. It's got the converter, so it's got the Z27 converter, and that is what fits onto the nib unit. So it's not unlike maybe a Pilot Vanishing Point. But then this screws in here. I just don't know what piece, I don't know what purpose this has. I'll have to learn. I need to learn myself here. Interesting. All right, well, I am going to play with that later when I'm not on video and spending all of your time. But anyway, if you're curious about that, you can ask me about it later once I've figured it out. Okay. But in the meantime, let's answer some other questions, shall we? So I'm gonna start out with pen and writing questions. The first one is from CarlMew57 on Twitter. And this is a haiku, which I think this is perhaps one of the first haiku questions I've answered on Q&A. So here goes. The LAMY Accent. Many coming soon in May. Give overview, please. I didn't check to make sure that's actually the right syllables for haiku, but I'm just going to trust you there, Carl. Yes, so let's check out the accent. So I got one. This is my personal collection. I really debate about which one to get because the Brilliant Briarwood is really pretty nice, but I don't know, the Corellia wood seems pretty cool. So that's the one that I went for. So plus I already got a Dialogue 3 with that gold nib, so I went for the bargain price of the LAMY Accent, and it's kind of cool. I like the styling of it. So for those of you who don't know what the accent is, it's a twist cap, pen. It pushes to post on the back. So nice LAMY pen, same nib feed filling mechanism and everything that you're used to. But what makes the accent kind of interesting is the decorative accent that's on the grip of the pen. And it comes out just a little bit. It's just a little bit tapered here, bulbous, if you will. And the cool thing is when you take the pen apart, like, when you want to fill it, this one is actually wood. So if you dip this in ink, it's going to stain. But because the grip stays on the pen, you can pull it right off. Or you can actually change out the grip. And in Germany, at least, and ideally in the United States, we'd have this. We don't have it quite yet, but ideally, we would be able to actually sell these replacement grips, and you could swap them out. So they have different designs and things like that. I aspire to be able to do that in the future, but we just haven't been able to get stock of these regularly enough to be able to offer that. But that's the idea behind the design of the accent. So it's really kind of an aesthetic thing. It's a little bit thicker pen than like a CP1, kind of similar in style, but that's kind of the idea. So it's a LAMY pen. It's got kind of that minimalistic Bauhaus kind of design. But I like this because it's got a little more interesting stuff going on with some of the pens than your typical just kind of straight gray and black pens, right? So there's a Corellia wood. There's a couple different designs that maybe we don't have, but there's a Corellia wood, the rubber. Those are the ones with the steel nibs on them that run around $87. And then up in the $200 range, just under, there's a Brilliant Lacquer and a Brilliant Briarwood, and that has those gold nibs on it. Nice writing pens, nice carry around. The clip is decent, spring clip. And so there's a lot of accents, and the fit and finish on these, of course, is phenomenal because it's LAMY. But that's kind of cool. So I had both the accent and the Dialogue for years. We carried both a while ago, discontinued both, but now we've since become like a huge LAMY retailer, and I have not had those two pens in my personal collection, nor have we had any of them around the Goulet office to educate our team or to answer any questions that we've ever had about these pens. So I'm excited to have these two just to be able to now have them and access them and have them for knowledge's sake. So we all benefit. But anyway, that is the deal. Cool. All right. Next one is Scheissgeist on Twitter. Do fountain pens inevitably open up over time? Comparing sketches with an extra fine TWSBI Mini from when I first got it last year to today, the lines are noticeably thinner. I don't draw with a lot of pressure at all, but my strokes are very fast and long. What gives? Okay, so I have a TWSBI Mini right here. This is actually the Mini All, but the design is the same and the nib's the same, more or less overall. Yeah, just make sure my audio is recording. We're good. So this is the Mini. And it uses the same nibs as some of the smaller TWSBIs, like the Eco, the Classic. So what is the deal with these things? Well, basically it's a steel nib. In terms of what we're talking about here, the TWSBI part of the pen, the mechanism, all that stuff really doesn't matter. It's really just about the nib. You're asking, is it normal for the nib to kind of open up and for it to write wetter within about a year or so? This is a tough one because the answer is no, it's not inevitable that it's going to happen, but could it happen? Yeah, it could. I don't know your writing style. I don't know, you know, you say that you don't use a lot of pressure at all. So I'm going to trust you on that and say that over a 1 year period, if you're not using a lot of pressure at all like you wrote, is that going to open it up? Not necessarily. Steel nibs are pretty stiff. You know, these nibs are pretty stiff. It's a relatively short nib, so the tines are not super long and super bendy. I mean, yeah, if I press on it, it's got maybe a tiny bit of spring to it, but you'd have to you know, put a good bit of put a good bit of pressure on it to really get it to open up a lot. But keep in mind, it's an extra fine nib, and the amount of pressure that you would need maybe over a year period to notice any kind of a difference, it could happen. It could happen. It's not an absolute guarantee, but it might. I think probably a bigger factor is going to be the type of ink that you're using, the type of paper that you're using, maybe the writing style. There's a lot of different factors, the writing speed, the angle that you hold the pen. Usually with nibs, I don't know specifically with the TWSBI Mini, so I'm speaking more generally now, but usually the lower the pen angle you hold it, the broader the nib is going to write. A lot of that has to deal with how the nib is ground, but that's often going to be the case. I see that with a lot of pens. So if you happen to maybe adapt your writing style to be a little bit lower pen angle, that could explain it. The ink, I think, is probably a huge factor. So I don't know if you're using the exact same ink or not. If you're not, maybe consider going back to the same ink that you use and see if that's a factor. Other things like humidity, like how much humidity there is in the air. If you're in a really humid environment and the paper that you're using has absorbed a lot of, you know, water from the air, it's not going to absorb the ink quite as much as if you're in a really dry environment and then you're writing with a fountain pen. It's going to really soak it into the paper. So there's all kinds of little things that could add up to different factors of how it could write. But in terms of how it opens up, it could be, but it could not be. And the last thing I want to kind of talk about here is that if you are in a situation where you have the nib is opened up a little bit due to pressure, you can actually fix that in theory. I'm not going to say that every single person out there would be able to fix it, but I'll at least teach you the principles. And I've gotten some feedback about people wanting to learn more about nib tuning and adjustments and stuff like that. And I'm by no means the expert here, but I've learned a few things over the years, and I can just kind of show you a little bit, at least in concept, of what you're going for. Are you going to want to do this on a $50 pen or more expensive? That's really up to you. Anytime you're getting in a pen adjustment and stuff like that, you're taking your pen and your pen's life into your own hands. So just be conscious of the fact that that's what you're doing. You're, you know, kind of trying to manipulate the pen. So just be conscious, aware of that you're taking that responsibility on. But basically what happens is when you have nib tines like this and they've, you know, opened up and kind of spread out a little bit, you need to bend them back, and then it'll pretty much write like normal again. There's a couple of different ways that you can do that. You can actually do it by removing it from the pen. That's one technique that Mike Masayama showed me that I like a lot, but for something like the TWSBI, it's not as necessarily ideal if you don't know what you're doing as much, because it's easy to damage the fins on this feed. It's easy to damage things as you're pulling it out because the nib's in here pretty tight on the Mini, and it's the fins on the feed are easy to bend, right? Especially because it's just friction fit and you basically just have to yank it out. So you can do it on the pen where you don't have to take it out, and then it's less alignment and adjustment. It's just a little less kind of intense knowledge you have to have about the nib and how it works to be able to do some adjustments like this. So again, with your own comfort level, you can do it leaving it on the pen. So basically you just take your finger and you kind of put it behind the feed just to support it a little bit so you don't put so much pressure on the feed that you're going to snap it. But basically what you want to do is you want to take one tine, like we'll say the right tine. If you're looking at the surface of the nib, you always refer to the tine that's on the right as the right tine and the one that's on the left as the left tine. Even if you flip it around and upside down, it's still in relation to the top of the nib. So I always refer to the right tine and the left tine, right? Does that make sense? So I'm going to push down on the right tine a little bit, and you should hear a little bit of a click. I don't know how easily you can hear that. I'm exaggerating it now for, you know, educational effect. But basically you just push it down, you click it once, and then you push down the other side, supporting the feed, and you make it click too. Now what that's done is that's basically pushed the tines kind of down and inward like this. And you click it because you're basically bringing one tine underneath the other one just a little bit. That clicking is you're actually hearing the tipping kind of click from one to the other. It's not damaging anything, it's just a little bit of friction there. But it's clicking, you're bending it down like that, and then you're bending down the other one. And if you're starting here, you bend it down and down, it's gonna bring it in just a little bit. Now it's possible to bring it in too much, and it's possible that when you do it, if you bend one tine more than the other, you could end up being out of alignment, so that you have to kind of watch out for. So if you have a loop handy, then what you wanna do is you want to, grab my loop. Then what you wanna do is you wanna look at it straight on and just make sure that your two tines are, you know, in alignment with each other. And you can tell as soon as you touch it to the paper if it's going to be scratchy, then you're not in alignment. And if it's scratching when you write to the left, then your right tine is probably too low. If it scratches when you write to the right, your left tine is probably too low because that's the one that's dragging. So you kind of look at it with your loop and you can, you know, just adjust it and basically just kind of bend them up and down a little bit until it gets back in place. So again, do you want to practice that on a $50 pen? That's totally up to you. But you can try that on a jinhao or, you know, a preppy or something like that, a lower price pen, and kind of get your feet wet on that. But that is the basic concept. And then by doing that, you're basically adjusting the tines back closer together, decreasing the flow, and you're going to write with a smaller tip. So that's pretty much the process of how you do it. You can, if you really want to get smaller, you can regrind and all that kind of stuff. We're not going to get into that today, but that's with a simple adjustment of how you can do it. So anyway, fun little bonus tip in there. I wasn't even planning on showing you that, but we got into it. So I hope you enjoyed that. All right, next question. This is from Will for Mills on Instagram. Does the term dry writing pen refer to the ink used or the nib itself, or is it something to do with the feed? I've been having this dry writing problem with my Jinhao X450 since I got it last Friday. Okay, so you got it last Friday. It's a relatively new pen. It's hard to say whether it's going to be dry writing or not because it's a new pen and you may not be used to it, and that may just be how it writes. You may just want a broader nib size, quite honestly. And I'm making a lot of assumptions here, so I'll answer your question, but before I get into that, I know that I had the experience when I first started out with fountain pens. I expected them to be all ink, basically, to be extremely saturated, very dark, a lot of shading, and very broad. That's kind of what I wanted and just expected, not knowing much. Once I learned, oh, you have different nib sizes, oh, different ink has different characteristics, and I kind of learned all these different factors, that's when I understood that some of the inks that I was using at first were not as saturated as what I wanted, or maybe didn't flow quite as wet. And I really wanted italics and broads, not fines and mediums. So I learned relatively quickly what my own personal preferences were, but initially I remember having that kind of reaction to it and thinking, oh, something's wrong with this pen. Or actually what I was doing to kind of compensate is I had fines and medium nibs. I wanted really dark saturated ink. I was using like a Diamine Midnight, a Diamine like China Blue, for example, or a Diamine Midnight, which are both, China Blue's not that dark. Midnight's a little bit darker, but it's not a deep, I was expecting like a Diamine Majestic Blue, like a deep, rich blue. Midnight is nice, but it's not that deep, rich blue that I was hoping for in my completely made up mind's eye, that's what I wanted in a blue ink. So when I was using Midnight, which China Blue and Midnight were the first inks that I ever bought, and so I used it, I ended up writing with way too much pressure. I was really pressing hard on the nib because I wanted a wetter writing experience with a broader nib. I was forcing my pen to do something that it really wasn't intended to do, and that's just kind of how it happened. So that, I'm putting that out there, planting that seed that maybe that's where you're at here. Maybe not, I don't know. But anyway, I just want to put that there, just experience share and let you know that's where I was coming from. So what you're talking about here, if you're talking about a dry writing pen, what is that actually referring to? Well, dry can mean any of the things that you just talked about. Really, it's just that there's not as much ink as getting on the page as you think that it should. I think generally it can definitely be referred to as a dry writing ink and a dry whatever. all that kind of stuff, I think it's usually referring to the pen. I think a lot of it has to determine with, is it one pen that you're using and you've used a bunch of different inks and they all seem to write dry? Or is it that you have one ink and you've used it in a bunch of different pens and it seems dry? That's when you kind of narrow it down, and usually by mixing and matching and trying a bunch of different things, you can determine what it is that's really the culprit, I guess you could say, or just not meeting your expectations in terms of how wet something should be. But you just try a bunch of different things and that will help you determine. Since it's something relatively new and you got it last Friday, I don't know when last Friday was because when you asked this question, but I would say first thing you should try doing is cleaning the pen. Sometimes when you get a new pen, especially a relatively inexpensive pen, jinhao's usually pretty good, but you know, it's always a good idea, especially if a pen is not meeting your expectations in terms of flow, in terms of scratchiness or anything like that. It's always a good idea to try cleaning it out and then inking it back up. Especially, you know, if there's a flow thing, because there could be a little bit of manufacturing oil or debris or something like that left over from the manufacturing process that just for whatever reason didn't get cleaned out. In fact, a lot of manufacturers in their own, you know, materials, which Jinhao doesn't provide any materials, but a lot of other pen manufacturers will provide little booklets and stuff like that in their pens. They will usually say, in terms of maintaining and cleaning pens, they might recommend to clean out the pen first before you ever even use it. So it's just not a bad practice to do. I don't do it religiously in terms of any new pen I buy. I don't immediately clean it out. I probably should. LAMY's I always do because they leave blue ink in there when they test the pens. But usually on other pens, I don't, unless I have some kind of a problem like a flow issue or something that I don't expect. It's just really out of just overexcitement because I want to ink up pens right away. I'm sure you can sympathize on some of that. But anyway, so try cleaning it. It's always a good first step. And then if you really just, you know, look, this is a relatively inexpensive pen. If you want to open up the flow and you don't want to have to buy a new pen and get a new nib and all that kind of stuff, of course, you know, it's a number 6 size nib on this pen. It comes out with friction fit, so it's relatively easy to do. You can get a Goulet nib. There's other brands of number 6 nibs that you can put in there that you can get in a broader size. These come with a medium nib, so it's not super fine, but you can get broads and stubs and stuff like that if you're really interested. If you want to get you know, a broader experience out of this pen, maybe you're like, you know what, I want to try some nib tuning stuff, and this is a great pen to experiment on because it's relatively low loss in case I happen to damage it. There's a couple of ways that you can open up the tines. The easiest one that I can show you here without getting into any tools or any of that type of stuff is basically just overflex the nib. Now, you know, you're taking your pen's life in your own hands when you're doing this, and so I don't recommend doing it, especially with gold nib pens or pens of any significant value or importance to you. But basically, you just take your pen like you would normally would around a 45-degree angle, and you just write like maybe a 1-inch stroke or maybe a 1/2-inch stroke, and just kind of press on it so the tines open up a little bit. And by doing that, you're going to overflex the nib just a little bit. You want to be careful and take it in short strokes. But by doing that, you're going to kind of open up the tines a little bit, and it's going to write a little bit wetter. So do it when you have the pen inked, and do that, and try writing wider, and then just write with it and see if it writes a little better. Try a little more, and then write with it a little bit wetter. See if that works for you. Maybe you'll be able to open it up a little bit, and it might write exactly to your liking with 4 seconds worth of adjustment. You can try that. And if you overdo it, rewind this video 5 minutes, and you can see what I just talked about with the TWSBI pen, and you can try actually closing it back up. So you can mess around with it and stuff like that. It's not the worst thing in the world. It does, you know, take a little bit of practice, but you know, essentially the way that I've learned, a lot of other people learn, is by just doing it. So, you know, please just don't say, Brian told me to do it, and then ruin your pen and blame me and get all upset. It's all on you. But anyway, I'm just trying to give you some education. So hopefully that helps you out. Hassan K on Facebook asked, what pen should I get just to give to a nibmeister to get a ridiculously fine nib? What kind of nib? What pen should you get? Do whatever the heck you want. Like whatever pen is of interest to you in terms of the pen body and stuff like that. A good nibmeister is going to be able to grind whatever to whatever size that you're looking for. Now, I'm sure some are going to have more preference, and ridiculously fine, I don't know what you mean by ridiculously fine. ridiculously fine nibs are difficult to grind. I mean, when I trained with Richard Binder, he did teach us how to grind a quadruple extra fine, which is 0.1 millimeter of line width on the page, which is quite thin. And on some pens, that would be really difficult to do. But by and large, a good nibmeister is going to be able to grind something, more or less any nib, to be that fine. Or they'll at least try, and if they can't, they'll tell you before they do it, probably. But the best thing, if you're trying to go ridiculously fine, you're going to reach out to that nibmeister ahead of time and just say, hey, this is what I'm looking to accomplish. I want to get a line that's so-and-so fine. Can you do that? Or do you have a recommendation? Because honestly, when it gets into super fine nibs, it might be that some pens, the tipping material, the weld is not particularly strong, and they know that based on years of experience, and they would say, I wouldn't recommend some random pen just because I know the weld is not as strong, whereas you should go with XYZ. The Japanese nibs are going to be great for that. So Pilot, Sailor, and Platinum, they're going to be pretty great for grinding really fine because that's part of their culture and they do that a lot anyway. So starting with any of those is going to be a really good place to start. And then pretty much reaching out to whatever nibmeister you're looking to use. The one that I know that really kind of specializes more in really fine nibs, I mean, Richard Binder did, but he's kind of out of the game now. He's more or less retired. He's teaching and does some pen shows, but he's not taking on custom grind work like this. Mike Masayama, he's mikeatwork.com. He's really kind of known. He worked for Sailor for 25 years, and he's been doing his own nib grinding thing for a while. He's the one that I know that kind of specializes, I guess if you could call it that, in really extra fine nibs. Now, as far, I don't know his current thing, but I think he has something like a 17-week backlog. So you're going to have to be patient. But, you can look around and you can ask nibmeisters. Mark Bacchus is another good one. I don't know that he specializes particularly in really fine nibs, but maybe you're like, I'm not looking for a quadruple extra fine. Maybe ridiculously was too strong of a word. You might be like, I was looking for like a double extra fine, and that might be okay. Like a 0.25 millimeter would really be okay. And then you would generally be okay. So maybe look into that and see how it works for you. But that's pretty much where you're going to be at. I think, generally speaking, most extra fine nibs are going to be around a 0.4, somewhere around there. So if that gives you a gauge, 0.35 to 0.4, depending on Japanese or European, somewhere around there. So, if that gives you any kind of a gauge, if you're looking for something much finer. Essentially, the more X's you go, you're taking off like a 0.1 millimeter, somewhere around there. But it's really fine handwork. It's going to be totally up to the judgment of the nibmeister that you're talking to. But if you're talking about the pen, they might have some recommendations. As far as the kind of nib, you're basically going to want to go with the finest nib that's available in whatever pen that you're looking for. Because really the nibmeister is going to grind away to get to an extra double, quadruple, whatever the heck extra fine you're going for. If you give them a broad, they're just going to have to grind away that much more. You're making their life harder and making them have more work. So starting with the finest nib possible that's offered is always appreciated by the nibmeisters, I'm sure. So that would be one to try. I wouldn't go with anything particularly weird. Soft nibs gets a little sticky when you're dealing with really fine nibs. Then you're just asking for writing complications when you go. You gotta have a super light touch when you write with soft fines and flex nibs and stuff like that are ground ridiculously fine. Because think about it, the tip size is so small on that thing, it's gonna dig into the paper if you write with any amount of pressure. But maybe that's what you're looking for. So talk to the nibmeister. They're gonna specialize and have their own recommendations. If the pen type and nib and all that doesn't matter to you at all, you're just going for the fine nib, maybe they have a recommendation for you and you can check it out. Hopefully that helps. All right, I got a couple of ink questions for this week. One is from Tainted Crimson on Instagram. In a recent Q&A, Brian mentioned that there are certain inks that aren't included in the random ink sample selection. That is true. Which inks are those, and what makes them too high maintenance or problematic to be a random sample? I'm sure one of them is the infamous Bay State Blue. You are correct. So we made these decisions based on an assumption that a lot of the people buying the random ink samples, not everybody, but a lot of the people who are newer to fountain pens. And especially because it's random, they're not necessarily aware of or prepared to deal with some of the special inks that are out there. So this by no means means that the ink is good, bad, or otherwise, purely in the context of what we decided on the Goulet team for what was, you know, I guess safe for us to send randomly to somebody that maybe was just going to try it and not do any research. Like, that was the context we had to think of, because we saw a lot of these random surprise me samples. And what we didn't want was for somebody to get the sample, get excited, try them, and then not have researched it at all or be ready for it at all, and then be upset with us. So keep that lens in mind. Yes, we have all the product information on our website and stuff like that, and if somebody got the samples, they could go and look it up and then say, oh, okay, now I'm more educated. But we want it to go in the context of, nope, somebody's getting it, maybe giving it as a gift, somebody has no idea, they ink it up, oh my gosh, I had no idea that this was some random thing. So that's the context of what we're working in. All that said, I'm going to give you the list of what we have here, and you tell me in the comments if you think that we should do anything different, because I think it's up for healthy debate. This is just something that we kind of decided, really just out of our own experience and whatnot, of what we thought would kind of be safe, I guess. So the first one is Diamine Registrar's Blue Black. So this is an iron gall ink. We have a couple of different iron gall inks. Diamine Registrar's Blue Black is a slightly more iron gall ink. It's a slightly more aggressive iron gall. Not aggressive isn't the word I like to use, but I have heard of a couple of people that have used iron gall ink with regularity, and it's been a higher maintenance ink. It's harder to clean out of the pen, especially if you let it dry in there. And with prolonged use, not that you're that worried about that with a sample, but with prolonged use, you can see some corrosion and stuff on certain metals. So it was just kind of a thing where, like, you know what, we just won't even go there. It's not a super popular ink anyway, but we just thought if somebody was looking specifically for an iron gall ink, like Registrar's, they would probably want to seek it out and not receive it randomly. So that was that one. But then also we have the Platinum Classic ones, which are also iron gall, which we did choose to put in. So that one I'm a little up for debate on, honestly. I don't think we've had any pushback on the Platinum Classics being in the sample thing, but I don't know. I'm curious to see how that goes. Diatramentis Document White. We have the other document colors in there, but the document white is just kind of like, I feel like if a lot of people got a white ink, usually they're using white or off-white paper. If they get a document white, they're gonna be like, what am I gonna do with this? You know, so for the same reason, Noodler's Whiteness of the Whale, we just said, you know what, white inks, we're not gonna worry about that. Also, to the kind of the same effect, we know highlighter colors. So I don't have the whole list of highlighter colors here, but I'm thinking specifically like Noodler's Atlantic Salmon, and there's a bunch of others. The Dragon series of Noodlers and all that, we have not historically put those in the random sample set, just because it's the same kind of thing. If you ink it up and write with it, you're going to be like, this is an unusable ink, unless you put it in a highlighter and you're purposely trying to highlight with it. But again, with no research involved, you wouldn't know. We did leave the Bay States out just because they require a different level of cleaning. So Bay State Blue, Cape Cod Cranberry, and then Concord Grape. So we just left those out just because we were like, you know what, they get enough attention as it is. We don't need to have a bunch of random people throwing it in there without knowing what they're getting into. A few different Noodler's colors, just because some of the properties are kind of not extreme, but just unconventional. The Water Race, that's the whiteboard ink. Unless you're using it on a whiteboard, you're going to be really unimpressed with it. So we left that one out. Noodler's Blue Ghost, which is an extremely cool ink. It's the UV reactive glow-in-the-dark invisible ink. It's not glow-in-the-dark technically, it's glow under UV black light, but that one, without context of how it works, it's going to look like a scam because you're not going to see anything on the page. Noodler's Whaleman Sepia, Kung Ta Chang, the Russian inks, really just those are a little higher maintenance, harder to clean out of the pen. You know, permanent inks, so we didn't want to get too much into those and plus we've had some stock outages, ins and outages of those too, so we were just like, you know what, we just won't even bother with those. The thing that, you know, is kind of interesting is we do include shimmering inks, and that's something up for debate. We were really up for debate when we first got those, whether we should include them or not. I think the logic was that, especially like Diamine Shimmer-tastic, it's in there. You can usually see the shimmer in the vial. I think that's why we decided to still do it. And plus, there's a lot of popularity around and stuff like that. So, I'm up for feedback on that. So I'm just kind of curious, any thoughts on these? If there's any else that you feel should be excluded, or you feel any of these are like, why are you excluding this? I would love feedback on that. Just leave comments on YouTube, and I would love to hear what you think about that. But anyway, that's our list. Not super extensive, maybe 20 inks or somewhere around there out of the 600 or so that we offer. It's really just the ones that would be a complete, surprise if you were to use them. It is a surprising set, but surprising maybe not the best way if you use it with zero context. But anyway, that's our logic. All right, next question is the gratitude log on Facebook. I want to love Noodler's ink so badly. I love its permanent properties and a wide range of colors, but I find them to such long dry times. They become impractical to use. When I started using fountain pens, Noodler's Black was all I used because it was so widely recommended, but I found that across almost all paper types, it's easily smearable after more than a minute. I recently switched to using Diatramente's Document Black instead, and the difference is astonishing, no more smearing. I decided to check out the smear and drip test for Noodler's Black on your site, and it indicates a much faster dry time than what I've experienced. Is this a matter of a change in formula? I've experienced the same with Black Swan Australian Roses and Apache Sunset, and the incredibly long dry times are the only thing keeping me from buying a bottle. Any advice from someone wanting to love Noodlers but struggling? This isn't uncommon with a lot of Noodler's inks. Nathan specifically formulates these inks to be as absolutely saturated as possible, really because he's a frugal, individual, and he believes in packing in as much as humanly possible into these bottles. That's why he basically takes I think that bottle that he uses is intended to be a 2-ounce bottle in the industry, but he fills it to the absolute brim and somehow gets 3 ounces in there. I feel like he just makes extra room in there somehow, but that's why it's absolutely filled to the brim. He wants to get maximum utility out of those bottles, and he packs them with as much dye content as basically it can handle. So what that does is that extends the dry time because you got a ton of dye that's in there. Especially if you're using a paper that's not as absorbent, it's going to sit there and it's going to take a while to dry. Particularly if you're using any of the permanent inks, because the Noodler's permanent inks are cellulose reactive. So that means they have to actually absorb into the cellulose in the paper to become permanent. It takes a little while. It takes more than a minute for that to happen. It sometimes takes hours to be fully permanent. And so you're going to get a little bit of smear, especially the more ink-resistant paper you have, the more smear you're going to see, particularly on something like Rhodia, Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, that type of stuff. If you have more absorbent paper, it's going to be better. Diatrament is Document Black. I don't know exactly how that's formulated, so I don't know how it compares to Noodler's in terms of its chemical makeup. But it definitely absorbs more into the paper and dries faster than Noodler's Black. There's no question about that. In fact, the document inks really actually absorb very quickly. I would almost consider them more in like the fast dry category than most of your other permanent inks. That said, they do spread more, they do absorb more into the paper. That's part of why they're drying so much faster, is because they just draw into the paper more and kind of spread out. So it gives you a little bit different look maybe to your paper, and depending on what you're going for, that may or may not be better suited for you. But I would say, it's a great alternative to you. If that works better for your lifestyle, then go for it. Especially a lot of people, if you're using it left-handed and smearing is a real potential issue, it might just be like, the super saturated inks just aren't going to work for me. And then something like the Document Black might be your answer. As far as whether or not Noodler's has changed their formula anytime recently, I'm not aware of that, especially with Noodler's Black. That's a very kind of sacred color. But it is handmade, so it's possible that the bottle that was made a while ago is a slightly different formulation than what you're receiving today. In terms of how much of a difference that should make in terms of its smear and dry time, I don't think it should make a huge difference. One thing I will say, particularly with Noodler's Black, I've noticed this. There are like components of Noodler's Black that tend to settle out if the bottle hasn't been used in a while. So if it's a color that you're looking to use to get its like true maximum authentic nature of it, I guess, shake the bottle before you use it for maybe 10 or 15 seconds or so. I recently had an experience where I had a bottle at home. I always keep a bottle at work here, which I use pretty regularly. I had a bottle at home. I didn't shake it. I used it, and it was really kind of grayed out. It was more like a dark gray than a true black, like I remembered the black being. And I was like, oh man. So then I dumped it, what was in my pen, shook it, used it again, and it was a deep saturated black. So I was like, oh wow, that's right. I kind of forgot that, like, how big of a difference that made. And I had this bottle sitting in my house unused for probably 2 months. Okay, so I have a lot of bottles of ink, so it's not unusual for a bottle to sit there for 2 months. I'm a shaker, so whenever I get an ink, especially if I haven't used it in a while, I always shake it. That's just me. Specifically because of instances like this. So it could be that maybe it needed to be shaken up. I don't know. Maybe give that a try. See if that does anything for you. Another thing that you can try if you want to speed up the dry time, cut down the smearability a little bit, is you can try diluting the ink. So I would try doing this in a small sample vial first. Trying to see if I have a sample vial handy. Whatever, I have this bag of vials. Ah! Throwing vials everywhere. Small sample vial. Maybe put 2 or 3 milliliters in there, and then dilute maybe 10 to 20% of the Noodler's Black with distilled water, and see if that makes any kind of a difference for you. This is a new super secret ink that I'm testing out, one that you've never heard of, because I'd never heard of it. Anyway, such a tease. But anyway, try diluting the ink a little bit, inking it up and seeing if, if you dilute it in more than 20%, probably you're going to start to notice that it looks a little weaker in color and saturation and stuff like that. But maybe that will be worth it for you if it happens to cut down on the smear and the dry time, stuff like that. So that's another thing that you can experiment with your Noodler's Black. So hopefully that answers your question enough. I'm realizing I say hopefully that helps you out at the end of every question. It's funny the things that you pick up on that you don't even think about doing. All right, next question I have is from H1Sham9 on Twitter. What is the definition of a good quality ink? It's a great, super subjective term, right? There really is no firm definition. It's something that gets talked about a lot. So I'm just making sure. Oh, wow, I've been going for a while here. It's something that gets talked about a lot, but it's very, very subjective. Generally, I think a lot of people look for ink that's what they expect it to be or impresses them beyond what they expected, and that's good quality. I would think there's some basic properties, like, is it relatively easy to clean out of your pen? It doesn't dry out in the pen when you're trying to use it. It doesn't stain the pen. It flows well out of the pen, but it doesn't burp and have any weird issues. It dries quickly, but it doesn't spread out too much. Just kind of stuff like that. Obvious things like doesn't have stuff growing in it, doesn't smell really weird. The packaging is filled consistently, and the packaging generally looks pretty nice and is consistent. There's easy stuff like that. But I think it's universally probably easier to agree which inks are really bad in that respect. But good, I think, is really going to vary a lot depending on what you see. If you look at forums and various online social places asking about good inks, you're going to see some people recommend one brand and one ink type. Somebody else is going to have the complete opposite view about that being a good ink or not. So it's very much up to the individual and what it is that you're shooting for. But I think the beauty of this hobby is that we all get to experiment and find kind of our own terms, our own views. The one unfortunate thing is that there is no one kind of thing that we can point to, whether it's pH level, viscosity, like some chemical component. There's no MSDS sheets. There's none of the stuff that ink companies come out with, basically because they're really protective of their formulas. So there really isn't a kind of standard thing that we can point to and say, okay, this ink costs more because it has these qualities to it, and it means it's going to be a better quality ink than something else. So subjectivity is rampant, and it's completely up to your own experience as to how you're going to enjoy it. All right, I got a troubleshooting question. This is from Quan T on the Goulet Pens blog. I recently purchased a vanishing point with an extra fine nib. A great pen, but I realized the pen actually uses the nib itself to push open the gate every time. The tipping material literally scratching a piece of stainless steel each time I use the pen, and I probably need to do that more than 40 times a day. I know the tipping material is tough, but since extra fine has only so much of it, I have a concern about the longevity of the pen. Do you think that I worry too much? And do you see any vanishing point that's gotten depleted of its tipping material? This is a great question and something I noticed a while ago. And I don't know how easily I can show this. I'm going to try. But let's see how much we can get up in here. Here is the vanishing point. Ooh, let's get a little macro, shall we? Okay. So if you look inside here, I'm trying to catch the light right. So there's a little trap door, and as it comes out, there is the nib. And you can see at this point right here, boop, the nib is just kind of popping over that trap door. Okay, so if I click it all the way out, you can see how much that's coming out of the pen. Boom. See that there? See, that's not too bad. Oh, it's focusing on my hand. Get out of there. So anyway, that one little point where it was just kind of, it just kind of goes up a little bit. Now, this is a gold nib, and there's actually, you know, a decent amount of little flex to it. So it doesn't take a whole lot of pressure to just kind of push it up like that. And I asked the folks at Pilot USA anyway, I said, hey, I noticed that this is going on. Have you guys ever gotten any complaints or returns or anything like that? And they say, yeah, we noticed that it does that. And essentially, because of the design of the pen and where they need to have the nib kind of seated in the pen, it was something that they weren't really able to avoid, from what I understand. But they said it's basically such a small amount of pressure that it's actually doing, and the trap door is not being forced down by that tipping material. It's being forced down by the feed and the other parts that are behind that tipping. And that's actually alleviating a lot of the pressure of that trap door. And essentially that nib is just kind of like, boop, just like popping over that door a little bit with some very light pressure. And from what they tell me, they have not had returns or you know, warranty issues related to that. Now, they haven't had the extra fines on the vanishing point for decades. The pen's been out for like 40 years, 50 years, I think, even. Close to that. No, sorry, over 50 years, of course, because they had the 50th anniversary a couple years ago. Over 50 years, not in the extra fine, but in other nib sizes. They were not overly concerned about it. I have not had, to my recollection, I have not had any issues with that before, specifically related to that. So I'm not going to say you shouldn't worry about it, because, I mean, it's actually there, it's making contact there, but I haven't seen it being an issue for anybody. Maybe you're like a super active user, and if that's the case, you know, let us know about it. Let, you know, Pilot know about it, whether you want to contact us or their warranty department or whatever. If you happen to suspect that that could be an issue, let us know. But from what I understand, it hasn't been an issue. So I think you can rest pretty easy. But either way, Pilot's pretty good about warranty stuff and quality control and all that. So I appreciate you giving me the heads up about it anyway. And I'm going to end this week on a business question after I take a sip of water. Cucumber water, in fact. It's like I'm at the spa all day long. Somebody commented it right now. It was like, it's like I have a demonstrator water bottle because I can see cucumbers floating around in there. Cucumber water is actually really good. Electrolytes and all kinds of good stuff in there. Anyway, so this question is a business question from Lady Lily and Ill on Twitter. Lady Lillian Dill on Twitter. I don't know. I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong. This is more of an ethics question than a pen related. I hope this doesn't cause too much controversy. Not that I'm afraid of that. But I was curious if you ever feel conflicted during Q&A to only talk or answer questions about products and brands that your business sells versus products and brands you don't carry. You know, I do get asked about this all the time, not just in Q&A, but, you know, doing reviews and talking on social media and everything, you know, basically talking anywhere, because I guess you do something long enough and people start to consider you an expert or hope that you're an expert. There's no one that comes around and says, like, you're a pen expert now. I still view myself as I'm on this journey trying to learn as much as I can about pens, just like everybody else. I just happen to have sat down in front of a camera 1,500 times, that's all. But basically, you know, I'm very comfortable talking about this question. I've never tried to put on airs about being any kind of an expert because I still view myself as a relative novice, if that sounds crazy to you. I don't know if you've if you are newer to the pen world and you have a hard time envisioning me feeling like a novice, but I do, like, I still remember those earliest days where I just didn't know anything about pens and just being completely humbled, you know, because I was really active in woodworking and wood turning and making pens. And as soon as I stepped foot into the fountain pen world, it's like none of that stuff that I had learned before mattered at all, or very little of it actually translated. In fountain pens, I was like starting over. So I have really consciously tried to keep that kind of starting over mentality. I'm getting somewhere with all this, I promise. You know, so my whole video experience has been more of cataloging my journey as opposed to trying to seem like an expert. Does that make sense? Especially because I didn't know that much about fountain pens when I started making videos, and I never tried to like pretend like I did. I tried to learn what I could and speak really intelligently about the things that I knew, but because I was running a retail store from the very beginning and trying to learn about fountain pens and trying to shoot video, it really only made sense for me to learn the things that I was selling, talk about those things in the videos, and then that was what I ended up talking about. In my earliest days, I actually did talk about more things that I didn't sell, especially because I didn't sell that much in the early days. And I actually got some pushback on that from my very small community back in like the early to mid 2010 period, the first 6 to 9 months that we were in business. I was really exploring and trying to find myself as a pen reviewer, blogger, vlogger, whatever you want to call me. I actually kind of intentionally wanted to separate myself out a little bit because I used Gary Vaynerchuk as an example. And he had his wine business that he had with Wine Library, and he set up his channel Wine Library TV, and he had Gary V as his social media handles and stuff like that. So he had some degree of separation between him as the wine guy and his wine company. I mean, he was always very transparent and honest about that kind of stuff. But I looked at that, and he recommended his book Crush It to like set up a separate named channel for your stuff, you know. And so I came up with the idea to call it Ink Nouveau. So I was intending to actually have a separate blog and YouTube channel from Goulet pens. It seems silly now because it's like, why the heck didn't I just set up Goulet pens from the very beginning? Why was I trying to brand two things at the same time? And if you watch the earliest Goulet videos, the first several hundred of them, they're all branded as Ink Nouveau. The YouTube channel was originally the Ink Nouveau. The blog was called Ink Nouveau for years. Heck, the frickin', you know, Edison Nouveau Premier pen that we have, the reason the Nouveau is in the name is because we had Ink Nouveau as a branding thing back in those early days when we started working with Edison pens. So I was trying intentionally to have some degree of separation between Goulet pens and kind of the store and all that kind of stuff with me as the reviewer. But what ended up happening is it just was unnatural at the time for me to try to learn about products that we weren't carrying at all as a pen reviewer and then neglect the products that we were carrying. So if you think about it, like in terms of the way that I can provide the best content possible, it makes sense for me to spend time on products that I know, which the ones that I carry are obviously the ones I know the best because I've vetted them. I've learned a lot about them to be able to do customer service support and answer intelligently about them. And I also have direct access to distributors and manufacturers who are carrying these products, whereas pens that I don't sell, it's kind of difficult sometimes to get truly accurate, reliable information about some of these things. So I was like, why would I neglect, you know, the pens that I'm carrying and trying to represent and retailing for other ones that are kind of out there? So, you know, that's kind of where I came from with it, and just felt very natural. And I've always tried to be really transparent about the fact, like, I'm a retailer. And part of that helps with that is the fact that the content we put out is completely free. So you can take and absorb this, do whatever you want with it. You can even go buy it somewhere else if you want to. I hope you buy from my store, obviously, but just take the information and get it out there and just spread it out in the pen community and just get people excited about pens. That's why I keep doing this. But I can't review everything. You know, I got to focus on the things that I know that I can speak most intelligently about, and that's obviously going to be the stuff that I sell. And actually, if you think about it, there's almost somewhat of an equalizing factor. If I only talk about pens that I sell, that's actually, I'm gonna be less biased about those than I would be if I was maybe comparing a pen that I sell to a pen that I don't sell. Because, I mean, I try to be as fair as possible, even when I talk about Montblanc or Sailor or other brands that I don't carry for whatever reason. But I never do like yeah, this pen is better, this pen is worse. It's just not gonna make sense. How am I possibly gonna do that unbiased, especially if I have a financial incentive to talk about a pen that I sell versus one that I don't? That puts me in a difficult place. And I feel like I could do it, but it's like, what's the point? I think that is much better suited to the bloggers and vloggers out there who aren't affiliated with anybody, because then it's kind of more of a level playing field. They can have their own assessments, and there's plenty of people out there doing that. More power to them. Me as a retailer, it makes more sense to take and double down on what strengths I can have, which is telling my story, sharing with you my journey, which is learning the products that I sell as a retailer. That is my journey. And getting deeper and more accurate, more reliable information, backstories, interviews, and stuff like that for the brands that I carry, because that's going to provide the richest content, most unique content that I can provide you, as opposed to trying to be unbiased and spread it around throughout all brands and stuff like that. So it's to me, I've never really gotten a ton of pushback about the fact that I don't talk about Montblanc or other brands or stuff like that. Sure, I mean, actually Montblanc is really tempting, because from a YouTube like SEO standpoint, Montblanc is much more brand awareness in non-fountain pen circles. So if I made a bunch of Montblanc videos, I would actually probably get a lot of views on them. But I kind of avoid that because I just don't know about them as much. I don't have the time to research them as much because I got too much else going on. So I try to stick in my swim lane. I try to be intelligent when I speak about the things that I know, and the things that I know are the things that I sell. And I try not to overhype anything, if that makes any sense. Maybe there's some inherent bias that I'm going to have. That's always tough to eliminate, especially as a reviewer. But that's just kind of where I'm coming from. And then, my bottom line basically is, as long as I'm genuine, as long as I'm honest, and as long as I'm not a douchebag, I think it's going to be okay, and I'm not going to have a whole lot of issue, because the authenticity is going to come across in whatever approach that I'm taking. And then you all in the comments are going to let me know whether it's working or whether it's not, and I'm going to adjust and pivot over time as it happens. So I'm not just trying to hawk stuff. It's never really been my game. I want to be completely authentic, and my authenticity as a retailer, sharing with you kind of what I'm doing and what Goulet Pens is all about. Well, that's pretty much what we got going on here. So anyway, thanks for asking. It was a great question. I had a lot of good questions this week. Went a little long on the Q&A, but that's okay. Some of you don't mind. If you're still watching this at this point, then you don't mind. So, okay, I got a question of the week and then a writing prompt for you this week. So my question of the week this week is, what is the craziest or most challenging diet or exercise regimen that you've ever tried, and then did it actually work? I'm just kind of curious because I got diet stuff on the mind. That's more of a personal thing. I'm just kind of curious for you. And then my writing prompt for you this week is this is not something you need to write in the comments unless you want to. This is a prompt for you to pick up your pen and paper and actually write it out. So it's more for you. But I'm going to give you a writing prompt here, maybe in a half a page to a page. But if you feel more inspired to go longer, you can. But I want you to write about the best dessert that you ever had in your life. The best dessert. Write about that. Cool? All right, I hope you have a great weekend and a great rest of your week. Be sure to check out the new website next week. Be patient with us. Hope that everything goes smoothly, but it may not. And we will try to update as things progress. But I appreciate your patience and your patronage to the gouletpens.com store as always. Thank you so much, and right on.